Every major city on Earth burned at the exact same time. And we still don't know who held the torch. Around 1200 BCE, human civilization didn't just stumble, it vanished. Within a single generation, the most advanced empires on the planet, nations that had stood for 1,000 years, were wiped off the map. This wasn't just a war. It was a total systemic reboot. We call it the Bronze Age collapse, but that sounds too clinical. In reality, it was an apocalypse. But here's the terrifying part. The official story you were taught in school is likely wrong. We've found a letter buried in the ashes of a dead city that points to a threat much darker than just invaders. We'll get to that letter in a moment. Before we watch the world burn, you need to understand what we lost. The late Bronze Age was the first truly global society. Forget tiny, isolated tribes. It was a world of superpowers. Egypt, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and the Babylonians. They weren't just neighbors. They were tethered together by a massive, fragile web of international trade. They had multicultural metropolises, high-tech weaponry, and a surplus of food that made the previous era look like the Stone Age. But this prosperity had a hidden kill switch. Everything depended on one specific material, bronze. Without it, you had no tools, no jewelry, and most importantly, no weapons. But to make bronze, you need two things: copper and tin. Copper was easy, but tin. Tin was the oil of the ancient world. It only came from a few places thousands of miles away, like Afghanistan or even Britain. If just one trade route was cut, the entire world economy would flatline, and someone or something was about to cut all of them at once. Around 1190 BCE, the king of Ugarit, a wealthy trade hub, picked up a clay tablet and wrote a desperate plea to the king of Cyprus. He wrote, "My father, the ships of the enemy have come. They have been setting fire to my cities. All my troops are gone. My land is prostrate." He was begging for help, but the reply never came. Why? Because Cyprus was already burning. We've found the last letter ever written in Ugarit. It wasn't even mailed. It was found in the ruins, baked hard by the fire that destroyed the city. It reads, "The city is sacked, may you know it." Who were these ships of the enemy? For centuries, historians had a name for them that sounds like a horror movie: the Sea Peoples. But as we're discovering in 2026, the Sea Peoples might not have been the cause of the collapse. They might have been the symptom. To understand why these empires fell so fast, you have to look at their military. This was the era of the chariot. Think of a Bronze Age chariot like an M1 Abrams tank. It was the pinnacle of tech. A two-man team, a composite bow that could punch through 3 inches of metal, and speed that doubled a human's pace. For 1,000 years, if you had chariots, you won. Period. But chariots were high maintenance. They were insanely expensive, required elite training, and needed flat, open ground. Then the Sea Peoples arrived. They didn't have tanks. They were runners. They fought on foot with long swords and javelins. They were fast, aggressive, and they didn't play by the rules. They didn't wait for a formal battle. They swarmed. Imagine a $1 million tank being disabled by 10 guys with Molotov cocktails. That's what happened to the Bronze Age superpowers. Their elite dreadnought strategy was rendered obsolete overnight. The only reason we know anything about these invaders is thanks to Egypt. Pharaoh Ramses III recorded the invasion on the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu. He describes a conspiracy in their islands and claims no land could stand before their arms. But look closer at the carvings. These aren't just soldiers. They are traveling with ox carts, women and children. This wasn't an army. It was a migration. Why would hundreds of thousands of people suddenly pack their entire lives onto wagons and sail towards certain war? Something was happening in the north. Something so terrifying it made the risk of invading Egypt look like the safe option. For a long time, we blamed the sea peoples for everything. But modern science has uncovered a murderous row of coincidences that suggest the empires were already dead before the first ship arrived. The 50-year earthquake storm. Seismologists have found evidence that a massive tectonic unzipping occurred between 1225 and 1175 BCE. Cities weren't just being sacked, they were being leveled by the earth itself. The 300-year drought. We've analyzed ancient pollen samples from 2026 digs. They show a dry event that lasted 3 centuries. In Cyprus, the rain literally stopped. The tin famine. Because of the chaos, the trade routes to Afghanistan and Britain vanished. The high-tech armies couldn't repair their weapons. This is the system's collapse theory. It is the idea that a civilization can handle one crisis. It can maybe handle 2, but it cannot handle a drought, plus an earthquake, plus a trade embargo, plus a popular uprising, plus a foreign invasion all in the same decade. The Bronze Age wasn't murdered. It suffered from multi-organ failure. When the smoke cleared, the world was unrecognizable. In Greece, the art of writing was literally forgotten. Linear B script vanished and the Greeks became illiterate for centuries. The Hittite Empire, once the rival of Egypt, was so thoroughly erased that historians forgot it existed until the 19th century. Egypt won the battle at the Nile, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. They spent so much gold and blood defending their borders that they never recovered. They became a second-rate power, a shadow of the pyramid builders. So back to that question. Who were the Sea Peoples? The latest data suggests they weren't one group. They were refugees from Sicily, Sardinia, and Greece. People whose own homes had been destroyed by the climate and the earthquakes. They weren't villains coming to destroy civilization. They were the victims of the first civilization to collapse. They were the survivors of an old world, desperately trying to find a new one. And if you look closely at the Egyptian inscriptions of the captives, there's a weird detail. In one corner, there are figures that look almost comical. Upon closer examination, I think these guys are still alive in the carvings, and I think they're licking somebody's foot. Nasty. Even in the apocalypse, humans stayed weird. The Bronze Age collapse is a warning. It shows us that the more connected we are, the more vulnerable we become. When this system fails, it fails fast. Don't forget to subscribe to Old World Daily. History is only repeating itself if you aren't paying attention.